Hey guys, welcome to the Algarve. We're at the end of our 5-day trip from the top of Portugal to the bottom, riding largely trails following the ACT Adventure Country Tracks Portugal route, which you can download off their site, off the Adventure Country Tracks site. We were 18 bikes in total, not riding together. I sort of pack people into groups of 4 and get them to be self-reliant or self-guided, therefore to spread people out. The bikes we had on this trip were the smaller bikes, the CRF 300 rallies, VOGE 300 rallies, Fantic Caballero, Himalayan 411, Himalayan 450, CF Moto 450 MT. We had one other bike, big bike, a 790 KTM, and then Julian, who was helping me on this one, on an 890 Adventure. So this was, I think for me, it was a perfect way of testing this 800. It was not only a way of testing the bike, but also assessing my approach to travel, whereas I focused on smaller bikes. I like the 300s, I like the 450s, and I moved away from the 800s because I've always considered them too big. So this was my chance to assess the bike and also assess the suitability of a bike like this in this type of riding and this type of terrain. Let's start with expectation. I think there was an expectation of this bike, or an excitement, because it seemed to promise, or looked to promise so much. When we saw it at the ABR festival back in June, it looked great. It captured everyone's eyesight immediately because it looked good quality. It looked well spec'd, and then the price at 7,995, or actually 6,995, what am I on about, £7,000, just looked too good to be true. It looked to be an alternative to the Tenere, to the Touareg, to the V-Strom, but doing it at a price that was less and doing it with a lot more spec. And I think there was a lot of interest in that, and as a result, a lot of pre-sales were made. I think a lot of that interest was borne out the fact that there was a claimed wet weight, or a quoted wet weight of 213 kilos. And I think this was a big factor in its appeal. And unfortunately, when I borrowed it initially, I put it on my scales and it was 242 with the rear carrier frames, the optional rear carrier frames in place. So a lot heavier, 25 kilos or so heavier than claimed weight. And I think what's happened is, looking back at the original spec sheet, the 213 was a net weight, which was clearly without fluids, or maybe even some accessories. The Tenere is, 208, 212 or thereabouts. So it's a good 25 kilos heavier than Tenere. But you've got a centre stand, you've got side racks, rear rack, you've got a sump guard, you've got tubular spoke tyres, so that accounts for maybe 15 or so kilos. So I would say, all in all, it's probably 8 to 10 kilos heavier than a Tenere, but it's also got 7 litres more of fuel. So actually, for people aghast at the weight of it, it's not that far off what we're used to. I think the only exception is the VOGE DS800X and the Rally, which seem to manage, I don't know how, come under 200 kilos. So I would say from the outset, if you're looking for an alternative to the Tenere, this is not it. So let's get that out of the way straight away. It's not. There is a Tenere class of bike which brings in the Touareg, which brings in the Cove. I'm trying to think, exciting bikes, KTM 890s, probably Ducati Desert X's. Those aggressive off-road derived, or certainly very capable motorcycles, which are bought by a certain type of person who wants the utmost level of off-road performance in their mid-weight adventure bike. I think the VOGE is not in that class. I think it's in a different class. It moves more into V-Strom territory, or Tiger 900 territory even. And I'm going to try and go through why I think that, and why that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because the reality is, there are lots of people wanting the look and the feel of a big adventure bike, but not wanting the compromises. I rode a Tenere 700 in America back in May. And I've got to be honest, it didn't impress me. And it didn't impress me because what I've encountered was a big trail bike that was tall, top heavy, uncomfortable seat, poor fuel range, tube tyres. It was nothing I wanted in a travel bike. And so there's a lot of people buying the Tenere, and I don't think it's the right bike for them. I think they want something softer, more travel orientated, maybe a more manageable weight rather than top heavy, more road biased. And I think this is where I'm getting to with this VOGE. I'm going to keep going through it. I've made a list of notes. I've got my GoPro attached to my notebook, and I'm walking and talking. I think the crucial thing is off-road. People are thinking, I want an off-road bike. And half the problem is the marketing of the bike is pushing it as an off-road machine. And I think it's wrong. Like, it doesn't need to be an off-road bike. Most people aren't going to buy this to go off-road. And if they really want an 800cc off-road bike, there are better buys. They're going to cost more money. but there are better bikes, and trying to compete with the Touareg, with the 890s, with the Tenere is always going to be a difficult ask. So off-road, you've got 242 kilos, then with the hard luggage, probably about 265. She's a big girl. It's a heavy bike to ride off-road, and that's always going to impede its ability to be agile, fun, engaging to ride. And that's not to say that it wasn't. I think what I liked about the bike, it's got a great standing position, nice slim seat so you can get your feet nice and comfy on the pegs, which the pegs are good size. The reach to the handlebars is good, and the overall ergonomics of the bike as an off-roader are good. I think what you've got, unfortunately, as a consequence of a 24-litre tank, is quite a lot of mass around the front end. You can feel the weight ahead of you, so you're aware of that, and that means that maybe you're downhill descending, maybe you're in sand, you can feel that front end wanting to push a little bit. Then obviously I've got the weight of the hard panniers on the rear, which ideally you'd put soft panniers, but I wanted to test the panniers as well as the bike. So you've got a lot of mass pushing you, and if you've got a lot of mass pushing you, you're always having to work around that. And that's not to say the bike's not capable, but you always have to be more concentrated, more aware of your lines, and more projective of the direction you want to go in, because you can't quickly move line. I think what helps the bike off-road is the fact that the weight is actually carried down low. So when you're moving at speed, you can feel the mass of the bike, but when you're stationary or going slow or wanting to do a U-turn in the forest where you've gone wrong, it's easy to get your feet down because it's an 850mm seat, so it's a manageable seat height. And then the weight just seems to, it's a high weight, spec sheet weight, but the way it sits in the chassis feels low, so it never feels like it's going to want to tip over. I was nervous riding that Tenere 700. I was nervous moving it around, pulling on the gravel at the side of the road, etc., because it always felt like it wanted to fall over. I think the beauty of this VOGE, and it might be useful for people who are a bit shorter legged or people who wanted to carry pillions, is that it's very easy to get both feet down, and then the weight of the bike almost sits it upright. So you can manhandle the bike. It doesn't feel like you're working against the weight. It almost feels like the weight's working with you. Interestingly, Julian, who's helping me on this trip, is on an 890 KTM, the Adventure, and he's on with soft luggage and everything, so he's not got the bulk that I've got. He's not got the accessories, the centre stand that this has got, or the level of fuel on board as this has. But off the stand, the VOGE feels lighter, and he even commented on that when he was moving the bikes out the car park, and that's a big factor. So people who focus on the spec sheet weight miss so many other factors that are more relative or more important than the actual spec sheet weight. Where does it carry it? Where does it carry the weight? Now, what does it feel like to move around? Seat height, seat width. There's so many variables that are more important than just the numerics of spec sheet weight. So off-road, it's good. It's not great. It's middle of the road. There's tyres on it with the Pirelli STR Rallies. It's quite dry track, so I don't think the tyres made much of a difference. I kept them aired up because I didn't want to crack a rim or anything. It's tubeless spoke wheels, so if you get deflate, if you did hit something hard, you could crack a rim and then you'd be stranded. I think the suspension is one thing that probably lets it down off-road, and that's not to say it's bad suspension, but it feels more road-derived suspension or more road-tuned suspension. And because there's so much weight on the bike, it's sat quite squat in its springs already. So it doesn't feel like you've got a hell of an amount of travel, which means when you're hitting the bedrock and the rocks that are coming through, you have to work the bike. You have to sort of thread the bike down the trail rather than just hitting the trail. And it just tempers your speed, and it tempers your pace, and it tempers your enjoyment. This is not unique to this type of bike. Any bike that's good on-road is going to suffer off-road, whether it's a V-Strom 1000, V-Strom 650, a Tiger 900, they're all going to be compromised by having to work both on and off-road. And I had fun on the VOGE, but I was never unaware of its weight. I was never completely relaxed about it, because I knew if I got it wrong, if I carried too much speed into a corner, probably I was going to struggle to stop. So is this a good off-road bike for people? I think there's better. Is it a good off-road bike for people wanting to dabble for the first time? I don't think so. I think there's better, lighter bikes for it, and for somebody wanting to do the ACT with no experience, there's a lot of better bikes for it than these 800cc bikes. I would go for the 450s, the Hemi, the CF Moto, or even the 300 Rallies. Yes, you've not got the grunt on the road, but off-road, where you want to be supported by a bike that's there to help you, I think that's what counts. And I'm a competent rider, but there were times I was like, I'm working here. I'm working hard to make sure this bike gets to the end of the trail in one piece. So it's not an off-road bike. It's a capable trail bike, trail travel bike. The engine is a derivative of the KTM 790 engine, the parallel twin with a 270-degree crank. It's a good engine. It's very linear power. It doesn't feel as strong as 94 horsepower. It's not got a big grunt, a big bottom end. Like, actually provoking it at the rear off-road is sometimes quite difficult because you've not got an instant. It's not that the throttle's laggy or anything. Actually, the throttle is very good, and I'm surprised to read MCN's review saying it was snatchy. I don't think it is at all. I think it's a great throttle. But the engine doesn't pick up and grunt fast and hard like some engines, like even the V-Strom engine. Sometimes those engines, you have to watch them. You can't be sharp on the throttle because it will spin the back up really quickly. Whereas this, it was almost slow to build. It goes when you really work it, but it's not immediately strong. So on the road even, you have to work it. You have to work the revs. You have to wind it out to above 6,000 for it to really start to take off. I don't think it's blistering really quick. I think it's quick enough, but it's not going to blow you away. Something like, I mean, the V-Strom 800 really surprised me with how much real world speed it gave you. And I don't think this is quite there, but I wasn't disappointed in the engine. It's fueled well, it runs well. It actually runs without a lot of heat. You don't get a lot of heat off the bike. And MPG was about 60 on the trail, so I expect about 65 on the road. Vibrations, I heard somebody complain about vibrations that who'd ridden a test bike. I didn't get any vibrations. I think it's a smooth engine. So I think everyone, depending on what you've come from, what you've tested before, and how long you spend on the bike, that'll make the difference between whether you experience vibrations or not. One thing to note, off-road, I turn the ABS and the traction control off. Neither are very sophisticated systems, so if you leave the ABS on and you touch any of the brakes on any kind of gravel, it just freezes, it locks the brakes out, so you haven't got no braking power. Same with traction control, any hint of slip and it just cuts the power immediately. You can turn traction control off and ABS front and rear very easily. It would be nice to have a single button on the handlebars like the CF Moto 450 MT, where you could do it on the fly when you ride along, because to have to stop still and do it means that when you exit the trail on the road, you can't be able to stop again to put it back on. Therefore, increases the chance of having an accident because on the road you've got no ABS, no traction control. So I would like a single button. I don't know why they can't all do that. On the road, it flows well, it handles well, it turns well. It's very composed. It's not quick direction changing. It's very stable, because I think, again, because of that weight. I found on the downhill descent, you know, the bike's carrying you into the corner. I'm using the brakes a lot more than I would on the 450s, just because of the mass, the inertia is pushing you down the hill, and it takes more braking. It again feels softer. It feels like it's sat on its springs. It doesn't feel light and agile, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. It just means it's very cast into the ground, a bit like a Himalayan 411. You know, it's got that sort of flowing nature rather than a fast, agile nature. And probably again because the weight is carried low, so it's not tipping. It's sat, so you're rolling into the corners, rolling out of the corners. Brakes are good, no issue there. And what I really liked about the bike on the road was when we were coming down through Spain, and we've got to go back through Spain over the next 2.5 days tomorrow, is on the road, on the higher speed, on the motorway, etc. You've got a great screen, you've got no real wind coming at you, or certainly no buffeting. I can ride it with my open face bell helmet, with the visor up, no earplugs, at 70 miles an hour, and I've not got my tinnitus flaring or anything. So I like the screen. I like the seat comfort. I think it's got a nice foam in it. It's not hard like some of the Chinese bikes foam. So I'm very comfortable in the seat. I'm very comfortable in the saddle. I could do long days on the bike. Again, the weight of the bike with it sat low means I never worry about having to turn it around in a car park, get my feet planted down, and 24 litre tank means I can probably do about 300-mile range. So I like it on the road. Again, it's not light and agile, and maybe in some of the hairpins, in some of the flowing corners, you've not got that quick turn nature that some bikes have got. But it's very, very secure, very confidence inspiring. The panniers have worked well. I really like the panniers. For £700, I think they are to fault. They've not cracked. There's been no damage to them. I dropped the bike on one side stationary, and obviously there was no damage to the pannier. I think they're a great set of panniers. No issue at all. Heated seat I liked in some of the early mornings. It's just nice. You know, I was surprised how much I liked that. It was a feature I used more than I thought. Certainly in the UK you would. It hasn't got a quick shifter. That doesn't bother me. I've never been a quick shifter fan. I kind of don't get it. It feels like a lazy approach to motorcycling. Cruise control I would have liked, but that would have meant a ride-by-wire throttle, which would have affected some of that smoothness on the throttle, that refinement on the throttle, which I like off-road. So I can manage without cruise control. I mentioned in a video when I was riding along, it would be nice. The only way you could improve this type of bike is ESA, like on the GS, electronic suspension. So you could adjust suspension on the move to suit road or trail riding, depending on what you were doing. I think that sort of technology was brilliant on my old GS. I loved it because you could ride with attitude on the road. As soon as you hit the trail, it'll soften off all the damping, and then you've got a nice flowing bike, nice cosseting bike on the trails. I think my conclusion, if you wanted a quick conclusion, it's a great travel bike. I don't think it's a great trail off-road bike because of that weight. And the reason it weighs so much is because it's got so much fuel and it's got so much spec. And I'd rather accept it for what it is, i.e. a road trail travel bike, and have the centre stand and the tubeless spoke wheels and the big tank, than sacrifice all that and make it better off-road, where, to be honest, I'd still go for something smaller. I'd go for a 450 if I was doing the ACT again or doing the TET again. I wouldn't even consider an 800 because ultimately they're big bikes, they're big heavy bikes, they take skill to ride. Of the guys I've had on this trip, 16 customers, all on smaller bikes, if I had all of them on 800s with the level of skill that they've got, which ranges from little to moderate, it would be difficult. So the push for these kind of bikes as off-road bikes is just nonsensical to me, unless you're a skilled rider. And if you're a skilled rider, you want something more aggressive, i.e. a Cove or a Tenere or an 890. So the image that VOGE is putting out about the bike is wrong. What, saying it's off-road, it's not. It's a great travel bike. I've really enjoyed travelling on it, and I've enjoyed the trails enough. So I wouldn't think, oh, well, it's crap off-road. It's not. It's good on the trails, but it's great on the road and it's great for travelling. So much so that I've got a coast-to-coast trip across America next year, taking group out on our own bikes. And it's a perfect bike for that. It's better than a Tenere, it's better than a V-Strom. It's better than a Tenere because of the weight management and the fuel. It's better than the V-Strom because it's got tubeless spoke wheels and better accessories, and it's cheaper. So that's where I would put this bike. It's a great travel bike. It's not a great trail advent off-road bike. And nor should we expect it to be, nor should we want it to be. If you want that bike, get a Cove, get a Tenere, get an 890, get a CF Moto 450 MT. Don't get the VOGE, because I think the VOGE is actually the bike that was missing in the market, but they've not pitched it as the bike that was missing in the market. A really well-equipped, road-capable bike that can do gravel track if you want it to, but is excellent value, excellently well-equipped, and is just a functionally perfect bike for travelling on. It doesn't need to be sexy. It doesn't need to be exciting. It doesn't need to show it. They don't need to show it being drifted in deserts like they seem to be doing. Most people aren't going to do that. Pretty much nobody's going to do that. And if they wanted to do that type of riding, there's better bikes out there. Cove, Tenere, 890, smaller. So that's where I am. I'm in the Algarve after 1,500 miles on the VOGE 800 DSX. Confused slightly why we're still suggesting these bikes are good off-road. They're good if you know what you're doing, but if you don't, they're dangerous. Certainly if you're travelling solo, and I would always encourage people onto a smaller bike. However, if you're wanting a very capable, fun, practical and enjoyable, capable bike to ride on an adventure trip in the UK, Europe or wherever, I think the VOGE is difficult to beat for the money. So I'm going to take it across America next year, which should be, or I choose to take it across America next year, which should be a sign that I've got utmost faith in it, that I like the bike, that I would choose it to do a coast-to-coast American trip. And that's where I'm at. So take that from that what you want. If you might be disappointed that it's not the off-road bike that they were promising, that it's not as light as what they were promising, but the upshot of that is it's just a fantastic travel bike. End of. Cheers.